The cell was surprisingly comfortable, which somehow made everything worse. Jake sat on the bed, knowing that the council was trying to break him with kindness before they destroyed him with force. Troy paced back and forth in the adjacent cell, while Laura worked on a datapad they had somehow been allowed to keep, still analyzing information even in captivity. 3 days passed with no word from the council. Then on the 4th day, Ambassador Velrith appeared outside Jake's cell. The alien looked tired, if that was even possible for a Xanthari. "The council has reached a decision about your case," Velrith said quietly. "You will be tried before the High Court for sedition. If found guilty, the penalty is execution." Jake stood slowly. "And Earth?" "The extinction fleet is being prepared," Velrith said, and there was genuine regret in the mechanical voice. "Ships capable of sterilizing your entire planet. High Chancellor Drexar wants to make an example of humanity, to show other species what happens when they defy council authority. How long do we have? Your trial begins tomorrow. The fleet will reach Earth's solar system in 2 weeks." Velrith paused, then added something that surprised Jake. "What you did in the Grand Assembly was brave and foolish in equal measure. The evidence you presented has caused significant unrest across the galaxy. Protests have broken out on 47 worlds. The Council is struggling to maintain order." "Then maybe change is possible," Jake said. "Or maybe you've started a war that will kill billions," Velrith replied. "The Council has maintained peace for millennia. What you call oppression, others call stability. Stability built on injustice isn't peace," Jake said firmly. "It's just delayed conflict. Eventually, people always fight for their freedom." Velrith studied him for a long moment. "I hope you're right, Commander Morrison, because if you're wrong, your species will pay the price." The alien turned to leave, then stopped. "The trial will be broadcast across the entire galactic network. Every species will be watching. Make your words count." The next day, Jake was brought before the High Court. The chamber was even larger than the Grand Assembly, with seats for thousands of observers. The 3 judges were ancient beings from powerful species, their faces showing no emotion as Jake was led to stand before them. High Chancellor Drexar himself served as prosecutor. The charges were read aloud, a long list of crimes against council authority: spreading seditious materials, organizing illegal gatherings, conspiracy to undermine galactic government, and most seriously, endangering the peace and stability of civilized space. "How do you plead?" the chief judge asked. "Not guilty," Jake said clearly. "Everything I did was in defense of freedom and justice." "If your laws make those things crimes, then your laws are wrong." The trial proceeded quickly. Drexar presented evidence of Jake's meetings with other species, his transmission of classified information, his organization of what the council called a criminal conspiracy. Each piece of evidence was technically accurate, but stripped of all context. When it was Jake's turn to defend himself, he knew he had only one chance. This trial was being broadcast to billions of beings across the galaxy. He couldn't just defend himself. He had to change minds. "Everything the High Chancellor said is true," Jake began. "I did meet with representatives from other species. I did share classified information. I did help organize a coalition of worlds that oppose current council policies. But these aren't crimes. They're acts of conscience in the face of systematic oppression. You dare defend yourself by admitting guilt?" Drexar interrupted. "I admit my actions," Jake said, "but I reject the idea that they're crimes. The real crime is what the council has become. 8,000 years ago, the founders created an organization based on equality and mutual cooperation. They wrote a charter that guaranteed every species, regardless of age or power, would have an equal voice in galactic affairs. That charter still exists. It was never officially abolished, which means that legally this council has been in violation of its own founding document for millennia." The chamber fell silent. Jake pressed on, knowing he had their attention. "You call my actions sedition, but what is sedition except the defense of original law against those who have corrupted it? The founders intended the council to be a democracy. What it became is an empire, where older species exploit younger ones, where power flows upward and freedom flows away. You maintain peace through fear, stability through oppression, and order through the threat of annihilation." Jake pulled out the data device Laura had prepared. "Let me show you something. These are economic records from the past 1,000 years. Watch how resources flow through the council system." Images appeared on screens throughout the chamber, showing the movement of wealth and materials. It was stark and undeniable. Lower-level civilizations produced enormous amounts of goods and resources, which were taken by higher-level species as taxation. The wealth accumulated at the top, in the hands of ancient civilizations that contributed little but took much. This isn't mutual benefit, Jake said. It's exploitation. And here's what happens to species that resist. More images appeared, records of civilizations that had refused to join the council. Some were quarantined as promised, their systems sealed behind barriers, but others simply disappeared from all records after initial contact. No follow-up, no explanation, just empty files where entire species used to exist. What happened to them? Jake asked, his voice echoing through the silent chamber. Did they accept quarantine and vanish from history? Or did something else happen? Something the council doesn't want anyone to know about. Those records are incomplete, Drexar said. But there was uncertainty in the massive creature's voice now. Many species fail to survive first contact with galactic civilization for various reasons. Convenient, Jake replied. Especially since the council controls all the records. But let's talk about something more recent, something verifiable, the technology suppression protocols. Laura's research appeared on the screens, internal council communications discussing how to deliberately slow the technological advancement of lower-level species. The messages were clear and damning. Council leaders openly discussing ways to maintain the power gap between old and young civilizations. You don't guide younger species to protect them, Jake said. You control them to maintain your own power. You keep us weak so we can never challenge you. Generation after generation, century after century. That's not governance. That's enslavement dressed in diplomatic language. The chamber erupted in voices, representatives arguing with each other. Some defended the council, claiming that control was necessary for stability, but others, especially those from younger species, expressed outrage at what they were seeing. One of the judges called for order. When silence finally returned, the chief judge addressed Jake directly. You make serious accusations, Commander Morrison. But even if everything you say is true, what alternative do you propose? The galaxy is vast and dangerous. Without a strong central authority, there would be chaos, warfare, species destroying each other over resources and territory. The Council, whatever its flaws, has prevented that. Has it? Jake challenged. Or has it just concentrated all that violence and oppression under one authority? The galaxy doesn't need a ruler. It needs a true community of equals. A return to the principles the founders established. Democratic representation for all species. Fair trade instead of exploitation. Cooperation instead of domination. Idealistic nonsense, Drexar declared. Young species like yours don't understand the complexities of galactic governance. You think freedom solves everything, but freedom without order leads to destruction. The Council knows better. We've seen civilizations rise and fall. We know what works. You know what benefits you, Jake shot back. That's not the same thing. And the fact that you're willing to destroy Earth for daring to question your authority proves my point. Real governments don't need to threaten genocide to maintain legitimacy. The chief judge raised a hand for silence. This trial has become something more than a simple case of sedition. The questions raised here touch on the fundamental nature of council authority. We will adjourn to consider our verdict. Commander Morrison, you will be returned to your cell. The court will reconvene in 3 days. As guards led Jake away, he caught glimpses of the observers. Many were arguing passionately, while others sat in stunned silence. Ambassador Velrith watched from a distance, that strange expression on the alien's face again. Back in his cell, Troy and Laura were waiting for news. When Jake told them what had happened, Laura smiled for the first time in days. You did it. You got them to think, to question. That's all we needed. But will it be enough? Troy asked. The extinction fleet is still heading toward Earth. Jake moved to the small window in his cell, looking out at the vast city of Nexus Prime. Somewhere out there, across thousands of worlds, people were watching and waiting to see what would happen next. The trial had bought them time, but time was running out. On Earth, news of the trial had reached every corner of the planet. Dr. Stephen Palmer, Earth's chief diplomat, stood before an emergency session of the global government. Half the representatives wanted to immediately surrender to the Council's demands. The other half wanted to fight despite knowing they would lose. The chamber descended into chaos. Representatives from hundreds of species began shouting at once, some supporting Drexar's decision, others demanding more discussion. The judges tried to restore order, but the situation was spiraling beyond anyone's control. Then something unexpected happened. Ambassador Velrith stood up, moving to the center of the chamber where everyone could see. The Xanthari's voice rang out clearly over the noise. High Chancellor Drexar, I invoke Article 7 of the Founders' Charter. Any council member may call for an emergency vote on matters of fundamental governance. I formally request a vote on whether the current council leadership has violated the founding principles of this organization. The chamber fell absolutely silent. Jake held his breath. Article 7 was part of the original charter that Laura had discovered, a provision that allowed for the removal of corrupt leadership. But no one had invoked it in thousands of years. Most species didn't even know it existed. Drexar turned on Velrith with fury. You dare? You who have served the council faithfully for centuries, now betray everything we have built? I serve the principles the council was founded on, Velrith said calmly. Not the empire it has become. Commander Morrison was right. We have betrayed the founder's vision. It's time we return to it. The chief judge looked uncertain. Article 7 has not been used in recorded history. We would need to verify its validity under current council law. The founder's charter supersedes all subsequent council law, Laura called out from where she stood. It's the founding document. Everything else is derivative. If Article 7 exists in the original charter, it's still valid. More voices joined the argument. Representatives from younger species began demanding the vote, while older species tried to block it. The Free Worlds Coalition members, who had been scattered throughout the chamber, revealed themselves by standing together in support of Velrith's motion. Rena Cole stood among them, her voice strong. My people support this vote. The council has ruled through fear long enough. Krell was there too, the Korthan warrior looking fierce and determined. The Korthan delegation demands this vote. We were forced to join this council and we deserve a voice in how it operates. More species joined them. One by one, representatives stood and declared their support for the vote. Not all younger species either. Some older civilizations, ones that had grown uncomfortable with the council's increasing authoritarianism, added their voices as well. Drexar watched his power crumbling before his eyes. This is illegal. I am High Chancellor. I have the authority to dismiss this motion. Actually, you don't, one of the judges said, consulting records. Article 7 is clear. If 10% of member species request an emergency vote, it must be held. I count over 70 species supporting the motion. That exceeds the threshold. Then we vote now, another judge declared. All species in favor of investigating whether the current council leadership has violated the Founders' Charter. Indicate your support. The chamber transformed into a sea of raised hands. Tentacles, claws, and appendages of every kind. The vote was overwhelming. Nearly 2/3 of all member species voted in favor. Drexar's expression was dark with rage. You make a terrible mistake. Without strong leadership, the galaxy will fall into chaos. Mark my words. You will regret this decision. The only mistake was allowing you to rule for so long, Velrith said quietly. While the political battle raged on Nexus Prime, the extinction fleet had reached Earth's solar system. Admiral Krenth, commander of the fleet, studied the primitive defenses humanity had managed to assemble. Earth's warships were tiny and weak compared to Council vessels, but they had formed a defensive line around their homeworld. They're going to fight, Krenth's second officer observed, even though they know they cannot win. Krenth was a Xanthari like Velrith, and shared some of the ambassador's growing doubts about council methods. The trial had been broadcast to the fleet, and many of his officers had watched it. Some remained loyal to the council without question, but others had been moved by Jake Morrison's words. Open a channel to the human fleet, Krenth ordered. Admiral Greg Collins appeared on the screen, broadcasting from Earth's flagship. The human looked tired but determined. I am Admiral Collins of Earth Defense Forces. If you have come to destroy us for refusing to surrender our freedom, then you should know we will not go quietly. I am Admiral Krenth of the Council Extinction Fleet, Krenth replied. My orders are to neutralize your planet's ability to threaten galactic stability. However, I am aware of the emergency vote currently taking place on Nexus Prime. I am willing to wait for the outcome of that vote before taking action. Collins looked surprised. You would delay following orders? I would delay potentially genocidal action until our government has had a chance to reconsider its position, Krenth said carefully. Your Commander Morrison raised valid concerns during his trial. I believe those concerns deserve full consideration before irreversible actions are taken. On Nexus Prime, the investigation moved quickly. Laura's evidence was examined by independent analysts from neutral species. They confirmed everything she had found: the technology suppression, the economic exploitation, the suspicious disappearances of resistant species. All of it was verified and made public across the galactic network. The Free Worlds Coalition grew rapidly, with new species joining every hour. What had started as a small group of rebels had become a genuine movement, representing hundreds of civilizations. They demanded not just reform, but a complete restructuring of galactic governance based on the Founders' original principles. Drexar tried to maintain control, threatening species that supported the coalition with economic sanctions and military action. But the threats rang hollow now. Too many species had joined together. The Council's military couldn't suppress them all, and trying would trigger a galactic civil war that even Drexar didn't want. Jake watched all of this from his cell, barely able to believe what was happening. Troy and Laura were brought to join him, and they stood together at the window watching the city below as protests filled the streets. Beings from countless species marched together demanding change. We did it, Laura whispered. We actually did it. Not yet, Jake cautioned. Drexar still has power and the fleet is still at Earth. This could still go wrong. But in the Grand Assembly, something remarkable was happening. Ambassador Velrith stood before the assembled species and formally proposed a new vote. Not just to investigate the Council leadership, but to dissolve it entirely and create a new democratic government based on the Founders' Charter. For 8,000 years, we have lived under a system that concentrates power in the hands of the few, Velrith said. We have told ourselves it was necessary, that young species needed guidance, that order required hierarchy. But Commander Morrison and his colleagues have shown us the truth. We don't need rulers. We need representatives. We don't need an empire. We need a union of equals. The debate lasted for hours. Older species argued that change was dangerous, that the current system, whatever its flaws, had maintained peace. Younger species countered that it wasn't peace if it was enforced through fear and violence. Finally, the moment came. The vote was called. Every species would have one vote, regardless of age or power, exactly as the Founders had intended. The chamber fell silent as the votes were counted. The result was close but clear. The majority voted to dissolve the current Council leadership and establish a new democratic government. The Galactic Council, as it had existed for millennia, was ended. Drexar stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by guards who were no longer sure who they served. The massive creature looked smaller somehow, diminished by the loss of absolute power. You have made your choice, Drexar said bitterly. I hope you survive it. Council security forces moved to take Drexar into custody. The former High Chancellor would face trial for crimes committed during the years of authoritarian rule. It wouldn't be quick or easy, but justice was finally possible. Jake was released from his cell immediately. He walked out into the Grand Assembly to find hundreds of species waiting for him, not as prisoners watching their judge, but as equals greeting a colleague. Ambassador Velrith approached, extending a hand in the human gesture of friendship. Commander Morrison, on behalf of what I hope will become a new and better galactic government, I apologize for your treatment. Your courage and vision have given us all a chance at a better future. Jake shook the alien's hand, still overwhelmed by everything that had happened. I just spoke the truth. Everyone else did the hard part. Truth is often the hardest part, Velrith said with what might have been a smile. At Earth's solar system, Admiral Krenth received the news of the Council's dissolution. He immediately contacted Admiral Collins. The Council leadership has been dissolved. A new democratic government is being formed. Earth is no longer under threat of destruction. Collins felt relief flood through him. And the fleet? We'll return to Nexus Prime, Krenth said. Though I suspect many of my ships will be reassigned. The galaxy is entering a new era. We'll need forces dedicated to protection, not conquest. But one ship separated from the fleet moving toward Earth. Krenth himself commanded it, bringing a message from the new provisional government. The journey to Nexus Prime took 5 days. Jake, Laura, and Troy traveled on one of the Council ships, escorted by guards who never spoke to them. The vessel was huge inside, with corridors that stretched for what seemed like miles. Everything was clean and efficient, but cold. There was no warmth here, no sense of home. Laura spent most of the journey trying to communicate with their guards, asking questions about the Council, about Nexus Prime, about the other species they would meet. The guards ignored her completely as if she didn't exist. It was Troy who finally got frustrated enough to confront one of them. "You could at least tell us what to expect," he said, blocking the guard's path. The guard, a tall creature with gray skin and too many joints in its arms, finally looked at him. "You will see soon enough. Prepare yourself, human." Most species find their first visit to Nexus Prime overwhelming. When they finally arrived, Jake understood what the guard meant. Nexus Prime appeared on the view screen like nothing he had ever imagined. The planet was covered in massive structures that reached up into space itself. Cities sprawled across entire continents, connected by bridges of light. Ships of every size and shape filled the sky, coming and going in perfect order. "How many people live here?" Laura whispered. "Trillions," Ambassador Velrith said, appearing behind them. "Nexus Prime is the heart of galactic civilization. It has stood for 10,000 years, and it will stand for 10,000 more. Come, the Council is waiting." They landed at a facility so large it could have held 100 Earths. The building was called the Grand Assembly, and it lived up to its name. The ceiling was so high that clouds formed inside. The walls were made of some material that shifted colors constantly, showing images of countless worlds and species. Hundreds of aliens filled the chamber. Some walked on two legs like humans. Others floated through the air or crawled on surfaces that defied gravity. There were creatures made of living crystal, beings that seemed to be made entirely of light, and things that Jake couldn't even begin to describe. The noise was incredible. Thousands of voices speaking in languages he couldn't understand. "There are over 600 member species in the Council," Velrith explained as they walked through the crowd. "Each one has earned their place through strength, wisdom, or simple survival. Your species is being evaluated now to determine where you will fit." "And if we don't want to fit anywhere?" Jake asked. Velrith stopped and turned to face him. "That is not an option. Every species that develops faster than light travel must join the Council. There are no exceptions. The galaxy cannot afford chaos." They were led to a viewing platform where they could watch the Council in session. At the center of the chamber sat the High Chancellor, a massive creature that looked like it was carved from black stone. Its name was Drexar, and when it spoke, everyone fell silent. "The humans have arrived," Drexar announced, its voice echoing through the chamber. "Let us begin their assessment." What followed was like a trial, except Jake wasn't sure what crime they were being accused of. Various council members stood and spoke about Earth, about humanity's technology, about their history of violence and conflict. They talked about humans like they were children, dangerous children who needed to be controlled. One speaker, a floating creature with tentacles, spoke with particular hostility. "Humans are aggressive and unpredictable. They have fought wars among themselves for their entire history. They cannot be trusted with freedom in galactic space." Laura started to stand, anger clear on her face, but Jake held her back. "Let them talk," he whispered. "We need to understand what we're dealing with." When the speakers finished, High Chancellor Drexar addressed the humans directly. "You will now hear the terms of your integration into the Council. Pay attention, as these terms are not negotiable." The terms were worse than Jake had imagined. Earth would be classified as a Level 1 civilization, the lowest rank. This meant they would have no voice in Council decisions. All of Earth's military forces would be disbanded and replaced by Council peacekeepers. Earth's technology would be reviewed and controlled, with any advancement requiring Council approval. Most disturbing of all, Earth would be required to provide resources and workers to higher-ranking Council members as a form of taxation. "This is slavery," Troy said loudly, his voice carrying across the chamber. "You're asking us to give up everything that makes us free." Drexar's expression didn't change. "We are asking you to join civilization. Freedom without order is chaos. The Council has maintained peace in the galaxy for millennia by ensuring that young species do not threaten the stability of older ones. You will learn your place, or you will be isolated from the stars forever." "How long do we have to decide?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice calm even though rage burned inside him. 48 hours, Drexar said. "After that, Council ships will begin implementing our decision. Whether you agree or not." The session ended. and the humans were escorted to quarters in a section of the building reserved for visiting species. The rooms were comfortable but clearly designed to keep them isolated. Guards stood outside their doors. That night, the three of them gathered in Jake's room to talk. Laura was the first to speak, and her voice shook with anger. "We can't accept those terms. They want to turn Earth into a colony, us into servants. If we refuse, they'll put a barrier around our solar system," Troy said. "Earth will be trapped. No travel to the stars, no contact with other species. We'll be prisoners in our own home." Jake paced the room, thinking hard. There has to be another way. Velrith said this system has been in place for 10,000 years, but that doesn't mean it's right. Somewhere in this place there must be information about how the Council actually works, about its laws and history. Laura's eyes lit up. The archives. Velrith mentioned them earlier. They're supposed to contain the complete history of the Council. If I could access them. They're probably guarded, Troy warned. Then we'll need a distraction, Jake said. Laura, tomorrow you tell them you want to research Council history to help Earth make an informed decision. Play nice, act impressed by everything. While you're in the archives, dig deep. Look for anything that might help us. The next morning, Laura made her request to Ambassador Velrith. To her surprise, the alien agreed easily. Of course, Velrith said. Knowledge is freely available to all Council members and potential members. I will escort you myself. The archives were enormous. A building within the building, filled with data storage devices beyond human understanding. Velrith left Laura with an assistant, a small alien who showed her how to access the information systems. The assistant explained that the archives contained records going back thousands of years, covering every species, every world, every major decision the Council had ever made. Laura worked quickly, searching through files while trying to look casual. At first, she found exactly what she expected. Records of peaceful integration, of species willingly joining the Council for mutual protection and prosperity. But the deeper she dug, the more cracks appeared in that perfect story. She found files marked with restriction codes, data that was hidden from general access. Using tricks she had learned as a scientist working with classified information on Earth, Laura managed to bypass some of the security. What she found made her blood run cold. There were records of species that had refused to join the Council. Some had been quarantined as promised, their solar systems sealed behind barriers, but others had simply vanished from the records after their refusal. No explanation, no follow-up, just empty files where civilizations used to be. She found economic data showing how the Council's taxation system worked. Lower-level species paid enormous amounts of resources to higher-level ones, creating a pyramid where power and wealth flowed upward. Species could advance in rank, but only by serving the Council for centuries, proving their loyalty again and again. Most disturbing of all, she found communications between Council leaders discussing the deliberate suppression of technology among lower-ranked species. They shared advanced knowledge slowly, carefully, making sure that no young civilization could ever challenge the established order. The system was designed not to protect anyone, but to maintain the power of those at the top. Laura copied as much data as she could onto a device she had hidden in her clothes. When Velrith returned to collect her, she forced a smile. "This has been very educational," she said. "The Council's history is impressive." That night, she showed Jake and Troy what she had found. The three of them sat in silence for a long time, processing the truth. The Galactic Council wasn't a government. It was an empire built on fear and control, dressed up in the language of peace and cooperation. "We can't let Earth join this," Laura said firmly, "even if it means quarantine. Better to be free and alone than enslaved with company." "Earth won't accept quarantine easily," Troy said. "There are billions of people who will want to join the Council, who will think it's worth the cost." Jake stood and walked to the window, looking out at the massive city beyond. Somewhere out there, hundreds of species lived under Council rule, most of them probably believing they had no choice, no alternative. But there had to be another way. There always was, if you were brave enough to look for it. "Tomorrow we give them our answer," Jake said quietly. But tonight, Jake knew they couldn't fight the Council directly. The power difference was too great. But during his years in the military, he had learned that the strongest enemy often had the weakest foundation. The Council ruled through fear and control, which meant somewhere beneath all that power, there had to be cracks. The next morning, instead of giving the Council their answer, Jake requested another meeting with Ambassador Velrith. The alien seemed surprised but agreed. They met in a private chamber, away from the Grand Assembly's crowds. I need more time, Jake said. This decision affects billions of people on Earth. I can't make it based on 48 hours of information. Velrith studied him with those 4 strange eyes. The Council does not grant extensions easily, Commander Morrison. What more could you possibly need to know? I want to speak with representatives from other Level 1 civilizations, Jake said. Species that joined recently. I want to hear their experiences, understand how integration actually works. This was the gamble. If Velrith refused, it would confirm that the Council was hiding something. If the alien agreed, Jake might get a chance to find allies. Velrith was quiet for a long moment. Then, to Jake's surprise, the alien nodded. Very well. I will arrange meetings. But, Commander, do not waste this opportunity trying to organize resistance. The Council has dealt with rebellious species before. It never ends well for them. Over the next 3 days, Jake, Laura, and Troy met with representatives from 6 different species, all of them classified as Level 1. The meetings were carefully monitored by Council observers, but Jake managed to have brief private conversations with each delegate. The first was a young woman named Rena Cole, though she wasn't exactly human. Her ancestors had left Earth 200 years ago on a colony ship, and they had evolved separately. She represented a small human settlement on a distant world that had recently been forced to join the Council. They found us 6 months ago, Rena told Jake quietly when the observers weren't paying attention. We tried to negotiate, but there was no negotiation. Join or be isolated, those were the only choices. Now we send half of everything we produce to Council warehouses, and we're not allowed to develop any new weapons or ships. They're slowly draining us dry. The second meeting was with a Korthan named Krell, a warrior from a species that had resisted Council rule for decades before finally submitting. Krell was bitter and angry. My people fought 3 wars against the Council, he said. We lost all 3. They didn't destroy our world, but they broke our spirit. Now we serve them because we have no choice. If you have any chance to avoid our fate, take it. Each conversation revealed the same pattern. Species joined the Council because they had no alternative. And once inside, they were trapped in a system designed to keep them powerless. But Jake also noticed something else. These delegates, despite being watched constantly, were willing to speak honestly with him. They were tired of Council rule, angry at their situation, but they felt alone and helpless. On the 4th day, Jake gathered with Laura and Troy in their quarters. We're not alone in this, he said. There are dozens, maybe hundreds of species that resent the Council. They're just too afraid to act. Laura nodded, pulling out the data device with the information she had copied. And I found something else in the archives. The Council wasn't always like this. 10,000 years ago, it was founded as a democratic alliance by a species called the Founders. The original charter guaranteed equal representation for all members, regardless of age or power. What happened? Troy asked. The Founders disappeared about 8,000 years ago, Laura explained. The records are unclear, but after they were gone, the Council slowly changed. New rules were added. Power became concentrated in the hands of older species. Now the original charter is ignored, buried so deep in the archives that most people don't even know it exists. Jake felt something click in his mind. If the original charter still exists, it means the current Council is technically illegal. They're violating their own founding principles. That's right, Laura said. But who's going to challenge them? They have all the military power. We don't need military power, Jake said slowly, an idea forming. We need legitimacy. If we can expose the truth about the Council, show all these unhappy species that there's a legal basis for change, we might be able to create something bigger than rebellion. We could create a movement. That night, Jake did something dangerous. He left his quarters and made his way through the building, avoiding guards and security systems. He found Rena Cole's quarters and managed to slip inside. Rena was startled to see him. Commander Morrison, if you're caught here, the Council will use it as evidence of conspiracy. Then we'll have to make sure the conspiracy is worth it, Jake said. He explained his plan quickly. The original charter, the evidence of Council corruption, the possibility of organizing unhappy species into a coalition that could demand reform. Rena listened carefully, hope and fear fighting on her face. It's incredibly risky. If we fail, our worlds will suffer. If we do nothing, our worlds will suffer anyway, Jake said. Just slower. I'm going to start building a network. Connecting species that want change. I need to know if your people will join us. Rena was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Yes, we'll join. What do you need from us? Over the next week, Jake secretly met with representatives from other young civilizations. He was careful, never staying anywhere long, always making sure he wasn't followed. Troy helped by creating diversions and confusing the surveillance systems. Laura continued researching in the archives, gathering more evidence of council crimes and corruption. They found allies. Not many at first, just a handful of species brave enough to take the risk. But it was a start. They called themselves the Free Worlds Coalition, and they agreed on a simple principle. The galaxy should be governed by consent. Not force. Krell, the Korthan warrior, became one of their strongest supporters. He began quietly training volunteers from various species in tactics and strategy. If the council discovers what we're doing, they'll come for us with force, he told Troy. We need to be ready to defend ourselves, even if we're hoping for peaceful change. Meanwhile, the deadline for Earth's decision had long passed. High Chancellor Drexler summoned Jake to the Grand Assembly, anger clear in the massive creature's voice. You have delayed long enough, Commander Morrison. The Council demands your answer. Will Earth submit to our authority, or will you choose isolation? Jake stood before the Council, aware that hundreds of species were watching. This was the moment everything changed. He could accept their terms and save Earth from immediate hardship, or he could refuse and risk everything on a gamble that might fail. He thought about Rena, Krell, and all the others who had joined the coalition in secret. He thought about Laura's discoveries in the archives, proof that the Council had betrayed its own principles. Most of all, he thought about Earth, about humanity's long history of fighting for freedom even when the odds seemed impossible. The answer is no, Jake said clearly. Earth will not submit to unjust authority. We will not surrender our freedom to a government that rules through fear and exploitation. And we're not alone in this decision. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Drexler's expression darkened. You're making a terrible mistake, human. The consequences will be severe. The terrible mistake was made 8,000 years ago when the Council abandoned its founding principles, Jake said, his voice carrying across the chamber. We know about the original charter. We know how the Council was supposed to function. And we know that the current system is a betrayal of everything the founders intended. Drexar stood, and the movement was terrifying. The creature was huge, powerful, and clearly unused to being challenged. You speak of things you do not understand. The Council evolved to meet the needs of galactic civilization. The old ways were inefficient and dangerous. The old ways were democratic, Laura said, stepping forward to stand beside Jake. The new ways are tyrannical. You've built an empire on the backs of younger species, and you've done it by hiding the truth about how things used to be. Ambassador Velrith, who had been sitting quietly through the exchange, suddenly spoke up. High Chancellor, perhaps we should hear the humans' evidence before making threats. Silence, Drexar commanded. You forget your place, Ambassador, but it was too late. Jake had been waiting for this moment. He pulled out a data device and transmitted the information Laura had gathered to every display in the chamber. The original charter appeared, along with Council communications about suppressing technology, records of species that had vanished, economic data showing the exploitation of lower-level civilizations. The chamber exploded into chaos. Representatives from hundreds of species started arguing, some defending the Council, others expressing shock at what they were seeing. Many of the older, more powerful species tried to dismiss the evidence, but the younger ones were paying attention. Drexar's voice boomed across the chamber. This assembly is concluded. Guards, arrest the humans for sedition and conspiracy against Council authority. Armed guards moved toward Jake, Laura, and Troy, but before they could reach them, Krell and several other coalition members stepped forward, blocking their path. More representatives joined them. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the starship Horizon, watching the stars blur past the viewport. It had been 6 months since they left Earth, and every day brought them deeper into unexplored space. The mission was simple: find new worlds, map unknown systems, and prove that humanity could survive beyond their solar system. Commander, I'm picking up something strange, Amy Foster said from her station. She was the communications officer, young but sharp. Her fingers moved quickly across the display in front of her. There's a signal coming from the Andromeda sector. It's not natural. Jake walked over to her station and looked at the readings. The signal was clear and steady, pulsing in a pattern that could only mean one thing. Someone or something had sent it. "Can you tell what it's saying?" he asked. Amy shook her head. "Not yet. The language is completely unknown. But Commander, this means we're not alone." The bridge fell silent. Every member of the crew had dreamed of this moment. But now that it was here, fear mixed with excitement. Dr. Laura Bennett, the ship's chief scientist, stood up from her chair. "We should investigate," she said. "This is what we came out here for." Jake nodded slowly. He had to think carefully. First contact with an alien species could change everything for humanity. "Set a course for the signal," he ordered. "But keep our weapons ready. We don't know what we're walking into." The horizon changed direction and moved toward the source of the signal. It took 3 days to reach it, and during that time the crew could barely sleep. They ran simulations and prepared protocols for contact. Troy Hughes, the ship's tactical officer, made sure the defense systems were working perfectly. He was a big man with a serious face, but Jake trusted him completely. When they finally arrived at the coordinates, what they saw took their breath away. 7 massive ships floated in space, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. The vessels were sleek and powerful, covered in strange symbols that glowed with soft blue light. "Commander, they're scanning us," Amy said, her voice tight with tension. "Multiple targeting locks detected." Before Jake could respond, the view screen flickered to life. An alien face appeared, unlike anything from Earth. The creature had silver skin, 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, and a mouth that moved in ways that seemed wrong. When it spoke, the words came through in perfect English, though the voice sounded mechanical. "Human vessel, you have violated Galactic Council space. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." Jake stepped forward, keeping his voice steady. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the Starship Horizon, representing Earth. We mean no harm. We were investigating a signal." "Your intentions are irrelevant," the alien said coldly. "You have developed faster than light travel without Council authorization. This is a violation of Protocol 447. Your civilization is now subject to Council jurisdiction." Laura moved beside Jake, her eyes wide. "Council? What Council? We didn't know there were any rules out here." The alien's expression didn't change. "Ignorance of the law is not an excuse. I am Ambassador Velrith of the Zenthari species, representative of the Galactic Council. Your planet will submit to our authority, or you will be quarantined from galactic civilization for 1,000 years. The words hit like a hammer. Jake felt his stomach drop. They had come out here looking for new friends, new possibilities. Instead, they had found something that treated them like criminals. "We need to speak with Earth," Jake said. "We can't make these decisions alone." "You have 48 hours to respond," Velrith said. "If you attempt to flee, you will be destroyed. If you attempt to contact your homeworld without permission, you will be destroyed. The Council's patience is limited." The screen went dark. The bridge erupted in worried voices. Troy immediately checked their tactical situation. "Commander, we're surrounded. Those ships have weapon systems far beyond ours. If we fight, we lose." Amy turned in her chair, fear clear on her face. "What do we do?" Jake forced himself to think through the panic. They were millions of miles from Earth, facing an alien government that claimed to rule the galaxy. Everything humanity believed about their place in the universe had just changed. "First, we stay calm," he said firmly. "Second, we gather information. Laura, I want you to analyze everything we know about these ships and this council. Amy, keep monitoring their communications. Maybe we can learn something." "And if they attack?" Troy asked. "Then we defend ourselves," Jake said. "But we're not starting a war if we can avoid it." The next 2 days were the longest of Jake's life. The crew worked around the clock studying the alien ships, trying to understand what they were facing. Laura made a discovery that chilled everyone to the bone. Using the ship's long-range sensors, she detected signs of council activity across dozens of star systems. This wasn't just 7 ships. This was a massive empire that stretched across the galaxy. "How did we not see this before?" she asked, staring at the data. "They've been out here the whole time, watching us, probably." "Because they didn't want us to see," Jake said quietly. "The question is, why reveal themselves now?" Troy had a theory. "We crossed some invisible line. Built the wrong technology, traveled too far. Now they have to deal with us." When the deadline arrived, Ambassador Velrith contacted them again. This time the alien seemed slightly less hostile. The Council has considered your situation, Velrith said. Because your species is new to galactic affairs, we will offer you an opportunity. Send representatives to Nexus Prime, the Council headquarters. There you will learn what is required of your people. Refuse, and Earth will be sealed away from the stars forever. Jake didn't hesitate. I'll go, along with Dr. Bennett and Commander Hughes, but I want assurances that Earth won't be harmed while we're gone. Earth is already under Council observation, Velrith said. Ships are moving into position around your solar system as we speak. Whether your planet is harmed depends entirely on your cooperation. The alien paused, and for just a moment, something that might have been sympathy crossed its strange face. Commander Morrison, I suggest you prepare yourself. What you will see at Nexus Prime will change your understanding of everything. The galaxy is not what humans imagine it to be. The screen went dark again. Jake looked at his crew, at the people who had trusted him to lead them into the unknown. They had found what they were looking for, but it wasn't the friendly universe they had hoped for. It was something else entirely, something bigger and more dangerous than anyone on Earth had ever imagined. Amy, send a message to Earth, Jake said quietly. Tell them what happened. Tell them we're going to the Council headquarters, and that we'll do whatever it takes to protect our world. As the Horizon prepared to follow the alien ships to Nexus Prime, Jake stood alone at the viewport, watching Earth's sun growing smaller in the distance. Somewhere out there, his home was in danger from forces he didn't understand, but he would face them. He would learn their rules, their power, their secrets, and somehow he would find a way to keep humanity free.